So we are on the verge of a budget format revolution in the world of Flesh and Blood. While competitive constructed will likely always be the flagship vehicle for the game, how the ever-growing and wider player base consumes the game, I believe is set to evolve. So today let's dive into what I mean, why it's happening, and the changes that I'm making to evolve with the times. You're watching Budget Format Fab on Dice Commando, your BFF for all things in budget Flesh and Blood. Coming to you midweek each week, these videos are possible thanks to the support of our channel members. If you want to get involved with the channel and join us on our community Discord, please consider joining as a member. You can be our BFF and show your support with a like, a subscribe, and by leaving a comment. Community first, and go Commando. Hey there, my friends, it's your BFF here on Dice Commando. So today's video serves two purposes. First, I want to explain why I see a shift on the horizon of sorts for the Flesh and Blood community moving towards a focus on what we would consider to be budget formats. And second, in support of this revolution, I am making some slight changes to the midweek videos that you all have come to love. Now, from my standpoint here, the increased interest in budget formats in Fab is actually due to a confluence of several factors, probably the largest of which lately is the massive growth of the game, which yes brings in new players, but with it more specifically, as it's been relevant lately, is the much higher prices, or should I say the much higher demand, which is leading to much higher prices, right? And in some cases, let's be honest, the cost of the game is approaching restrictive levels for many people. And on top of that, then the catalyst for a lot of the discussion around this in terms of like, oh, this is too expensive, I still want to play Fab. And then we have Project Blue hanging out here that's been announced, which is obviously in development, but set to make a debut sometime later this year, probably at Worlds. So you've got people who are like, man, things are looking too expensive. And then you've got this brand new budget format that's an unsolved meta. It's very enticing, very exciting. So there's a lot of interest in, you should say, budget formats in general, as it applies to Flesh and Blood. And I do believe that that is set over the course of this year, maybe into next year, to really change a lot of the Flesh and Blood landscape, not at these large events. So it's no secret that the primary draw of budget formats in TCGs is approachability, right? And I should say that in all forms. Now, of course, budget formats are by their very definition cheaper, but there's more to it than that alone, right? If you look at Blitz, Blitz is technically a budget format because it is cheaper. Now, we all know, I know there's tomatoes being thrown at the screen now, and don't worry, I don't think it is a budget format. I'm just saying from a technical standpoint, it is a budget format because it is cheaper, right? By the very definition of not having to buy a third card. But we would not really consider that to be a budget format. And I want to be clear, there's no like price point that makes something a budget deck or not, right? You could look at a deck that has Bittering Thorns and stuff in it, and that might be, a $30 deck or wherever it falls, whereas other decks could be $5 to $10 and perhaps just as, well, maybe not just as effective as Aria, but you get my point. You get my point, right? So obviously we have affordability, which means lower barrier entry, which makes it inherently a lot easier to get new players on board and learn the game and serve as a stepping stone. I mean, that's why a lot of us have been utilized, how a lot of us have been using that through the years. But another really cool thing about budget formats is the increased creativity. And this comes for two things. One, you see it down below. A lot of these are community friendly. It's less pay to win, and it tends to be less competitive as well. So folks are a little more willing to go and try something new instead of just jamming the same thing over and over again or getting the latest net deck or whatever it might be, right? Furthermore, a lot of these, because a lot of these type of formats adhere more to the fundamentals, right? You have less combo pop-off potential generally because the cards aren't Majestic in this case or Legendary or whatever. You tend to adhere more to the fundamentals, which means that you have kind of a lower baseline that you can work within. So losing a little bit of efficiency doesn't necessarily carry the same impact as when you're throwing, things that are maximized from a damage standpoint. So the penalty of creativity not working generally seems to fall less in these type of formats. That's my point. Doesn't mean we can't still bomb and have a bad idea, but in general, the fallout is less as long as you adhere to those fundamentals. And I think this next one kind of fits in with that as well. Less impact from creep. In general, the cards that creep are your big bombs. right? Now, that's obviously not always true. You can get, I mean, imagine if Shelter had been released as a rare or something, right? That would have been creep in the truest sense. But if you go and you look at the commoner format as it exists today in Flesh and Blood, you still see Sinks, you still see Fates, you still see a lot of your fundamental cards over time, and it actually takes quite a bit to be able to break into that in terms of a new card being added. Now, we do see D-rarities and stuff, and that's not to say there's no creep. We'll be very clear about that. But the impact of creeps definitely way less. And then I kind of already talked about community-friendly, being less pay-to-win, less barrier of entry. It all kind of fits together. Okay, now, if we go and we look at Commoner and Clash, which are Fab's current two formats, and I know that Clash is not legal, and I know that Project Blue is more legal than Clash, so I guess I should include Project Blue in there, but I'm talking really more established formats. While neither of these are necessarily like the largest conversation drivers, they have very loyal players. And the community within those formats of those games is quite different than the wider Fab community. And what's interesting about that is, I think to the point of what I was talking about before, many of these players actually have competitive decks, but they still enjoy the format. So it's not just about being functionally cheaper. And in my opinion, what Fab has more so than all of those, so Fab enjoys all of those advantages that we just talked about, but it has one other major draw, which is evergreen format, okay? And I think that's why there's a lot of interest in Project Blue, because it's a more, I shouldn't say it's a better way, because that's from a certain point of view, but your heroes have more identity, or at least they have the potential, that most heroes have the potential to have more identity than they do as compared to Commoner. So with your heroes having more identity and it being a non-rotating format, an evergreen format, you can really play your heroes that you loved and enjoyed really forever. Yes, albeit at a toned down rate. And there's bans and stuff, we get it. But by and large, you can play your hero as your hero for the most part forever, right? So within the ever expanding card pool, your hero remains quite legal. And that's a huge draw. Okay, so we have this confluence of factors, right? We have the massive game growth that we've been seeing, which is more players with higher demand and insane prices in some cases right now. Also, with that growth, there's only so much room at the top, right? There are only so many people that are going to fit in a top 8, fit in a top 32, be a winner. And that's okay. That's great. And it makes it more competitive and we all rise together. But at some point, you just need players, right? You just need people. And someone could argue, well, but your budget players aren't buying cards, right? But your budget players probably aren't only playing budget also. So you have this thing, we have this massive community, the thing supported on top that's selling the vast majority of your cards, but this massive player base. I mean, you can go to, well, I was just going to say any other game out, that's not true, but go look at the big one, right? You have tons of players who only buy a handful of cards for whatever they need their new commander deck to be or whatever. And then you've got your competitive scene, but the game's doing quite well and it sells stuff and people still want to go chase stuff. And it's a net positive for the future to have more interest in budget because it brings more people in and then maybe they pop up and play competitive for a while and then they burn out and they pop back down. And that, again, the fact that there's an evergreen format means that players can pop in and out of the game. Certainly not at the competitive level, probably, right? You take a couple years away from the competitive level, you're probably not popping in unless you're a very special someone. But you can come back and get involved in the community and you're like, oh, you know what? This new pirate set looks awesome and I would only have to buy from this pirate set. Let's buy a couple cases of High Seas if I can find them, right? Whatever the case may be, whatever the set may be, or Dromai's back. Let's do that, right? We were able to get this player to hang along for 3-4 years, still interested in the game, and Dromai came back. Boom. 3-4 cases, right? Got to have the marvels, right? All this stuff. That's how it works, right? That is how it works for many players. And even our competitive players, like even the Brody Spurlocks of the world, who are amazing fortitude, whatever, they can't go forever. At some point, they got to take a break. So they can step back. They can come down in the dredges and play budget and come hang out with people for 3-4 rounds on a Tuesday night, play Icelander or whomever they missed from the old days. And then if they got to go take a break, they can come back. They got to go to college. They can come back after college, whatever it may be, right? So, budget format revolution. Probably talked too long and got it, but here we are because I'm passionate about it and I'm convinced that this is happening over the next year. So what am I doing about it? Don't worry, this will be short. You see it down here. We are changing the midweek format. It's no longer Dice Commando. Pour one out for Dice Commando. That one was a good one. That was suggested by a viewer. I stole it with pride, and it became a thing. We've been doing it for over 2 years, I believe, at this point. Coming to you midweek, most weeks on Dice Commando. So I'm committing to coming to you midweek every single week. It won't always be on a Wednesday, because then if I miss a Wednesday, I'll get hate mail. I will. But coming to you midweek, every week, I'm committing to that, focusing on budget format Flesh and Blood. That means we could talk about Commoner, we could talk about Project Blue, or whatever Project Blue will become, talk about whatever the thing is in the future. So that's the new plan. I'd love your like if you like this plan. And we're going to do it anyway, to be clear, because I believe it's the right thing to do to shift with the narrative of the community and look long term. So going forward, Dice Commando is your BFF. Thank you for joining, and go Commando.